Welcome back, Strategic Angling fans. My name is Brady Hanna. I'm joined by two special guests today, and we have some exciting topics to talk about. Appreciate you guys for tuning in. This is our 7th episode. We just finished up the outdoor show. It was awesome to see many of you down there, and also congrats to our winners of the past bunch of giveaways. I'm going to let these two quickly introduce themselves, and then we're going to talk about what we're talking about today.
JJ Patton, and I've been on the Chatterbait train since the onset, so I've got a little bit of tips to pass on to you.
Yeah, I'm Chuck Fiser. Same thing. If you're not throwing chatterbait nowadays, you're really missing the boat. So hopefully we can show you some insight on the different chatterbaits that are out there.
Yep. So that brings up today's topic, and that is all things chatterbaits. You know, the different ones that ZMan offers, the ones that have been licensed through ZMan. What makes a jackhammer, and then after that, we're going to maybe dive into some of our favorite trailers. So I think I'm going to kick it off to JJ. He's going to start out by telling us a little bit about what is a chatterbait, what are some of the different ones out there, and take it away, JJ.
So the chatterbait is kind of like the Kleenex term. You know, you use the term Kleenex for any facial tissue. We call most vibrating jigs chatterbaits, but truly there's the ZMan holds the patent from the original Rad Lures chatterbait, and they hold the patent, which is mainly on the blade and the way the blade attaches to the head of the bait directly. There are lots of spin-offs, lots of companies making baits. Some are good, some are not as good. Some have certain strengths that these may not have. But we're going to talk mostly about ZMan today. We're going to branch off just a little bit, but wanted to go through the different ZMan products. And there's several. I'm going to start at the top with the Jackhammer. The Jackhammer is about 16 or 17 bucks usually. You're paying a lot, but you're paying for a good quality hook. You're paying for a dual wire keeper on the shank of the hook to hold your keeper on. You're paying for a decoy egg snap, a stainless blade, and eyes on the head of the bait as well. So there's a lot of...
Hand-tied skirt.
And a hand-tied skirt, yes. So there's a lot of things that are real nice about this. ZMan makes several other ones. This is the original chatterbait. This is the Chatterbait Elite, which is kind of in between. The original costs about $4 or $5. You can even get them cheaper than that on sale a lot of times. The Elite is a couple more dollars than that. It has a gamakatsu hook and a hand-tied skirt. It lacks some of the high-end features of the Jackhammer. They also make a Freedom Chatterbait, which has a swinging lead head on there, so it's not really a fixed lead head, just like a lot of people throw biffle heads. There's other ones. There's a Chatterbait Custom. There's the Project Z. Some of them come in weedless, and I'm not 100%
Project Z does.
Project Z comes in weedless.
Comes in either or.
And
it's more of a...
It's just a weed guard.
It has a weed guard. These do not have a weed guard.
Right. And the Project Z is a shad head. It's got eyes, but it's shad shaped. So
there's a lot of different options. One of the main questions is going to be, well, what makes this Jackhammer better than the original? You're basically getting 3 or 4 of these for every one of these. So if you fish where there's toothy critters, I'd probably aim this way. If you're not losing a lot of baits, there are some qualities about this one that make it better. It starts vibrating as soon as it hits the water. It also hunts a little bit, which is kind of that erratic action where if you're reeling straight in, it'll jag off to the side and won't just come back straight. And we'll talk a little bit about that when we add trailers also, because you can manipulate that a little bit with the type of trailer you use.
Right. And the other thing to mention across the different ZMan line is they don't all have the same blades and they don't have all the same cadence and sound.
No.
Correct.
No, and they all can work under different circumstances. So you just basically gotta throw them. It's nice to have a little bit of each to find out what the fish wants.
Some of them work better if you're fishing a little deeper. Some of them are better if you're burning. Sometimes they'll roll. A jackhammer won't roll. You can burn that thing as fast as you want. It comes right back at you.
Right.
Some of the other ones, there may be a little bit of roll, but yeah, there's some subtle differences. You know, you probably want to get a couple of each and try to figure it out yourself.
And the Jackhammer also comes in a lot heavier weights. I think you can get all the way to 1.5 ounces on the Jackhammer, where a lot of the other chatterbaits that you look at will be just 3/8 or 1/2 ounce.
Yeah, and that brings up the other thing. The original does come in a fourth also, a quarter.
Right, quarter.
And that is how I originally used the quarter. And I like the quarter. In shallow water, you don't want to use a big bulky trailer. It'll basically be a topwater bait. But
They make a micro one too.
Yes,
a real
they do.
little one.
Yep.
I know some guys use them for pan fishing or crappie fishing, even bass fishing. Sometimes when it's real cold out.
So do any of these feature is all of them a lead head or some of it is?
all of these are lead. The Jackhammer U.S. domestic is lead. You can get tungsten jackhammers if you order off Ichiban or one of the Japanese JDM market websites. But locally and in the U.S., this is what you're going to get.
Yeah.
Lead.
So that covers a little bit about the ZMan offerings. What are some of the other ones that have licensed the ZMan technology?
Yeah, and Matt carries all these ZMan products. He also carries another one. Strike King makes the Cricket.
Yep.
And they pay a licensing fee to ZMan, so their blade is actually connected directly to the head as well. But they've worked out an agreement with them to make it legal to sell. There are a lot of other chatterbaits on the market. A lot of them will have a split ring between the blade and the head itself. The only drawback of that, I think, is that when you throw, and we've tested these in JJ's pool, the drawback of that is when you throw the bait out there and it hits the water, a lot of times when there's a ring, a split ring with that connection, the blade does not start kicking right when it hits the water. If you throw a Z-Man into the water, the blade will start kicking immediately when it hits the water. Where a lot of times, if there is a split ring, you gotta snap your rod once or twice to break that connection up, and then it will start kicking. But it might be out of the strike zone by the time it starts kicking.
And you think that's partially due to the fact that the ring allows the blade angle to twist when you cast?
Right, and it might get a little hung up when you're casting it, and it just doesn't quite start off. Now, sometimes I think it will, but a lot of times, your strike zone is a really short area. If you're throwing to wood or, some clumps of grass, and before it starts kicking, it might be out of the strike zone.
And the other time that's a benefit is if you're dropping it, like you reel it by a log, you drop it and then start again, it starts right away. Or if you guys will yo-yo these, like in the cold water, you can yo-yo these kind of off the bottom. Dudes are doing it on ledges now down on the Tennessee River lakes and stuff where they'll throw a 1 ounce chatterbait on a ledge and they're yo-yoing it. And you really want, if you're going to do that, you need that thing to. But same thing here, if you pull it by a stump and drop it, when you start again, you want that blade to go right away.
And that's the whole idea why they patented it. I mean, that's the whole idea of the jig is for that purpose.
Yeah, so the reason people put a split ring in is because that's the way around the patent.
Right.
To be legal and not infringing.
Right.
Now, are there any other legal actual chatterbaits other than Thunder Cricket and Z-Man?
I don't believe so, unless you're making them yourself, handmade. I don't think there's any on the market. I know Imakatsu makes probably the best hunting rattle, or I guess you'd call it blade bait. It wouldn't be called a chatterbait, but it probably hunts better than any chatterbait even on the market. And it's not really directly line tied, but it is kind of. It's got a little loop right there at the eye. But these things in JJ's pool really, really hunt. It's almost like throwing a wiggle wart.
Yeah.
When these guys are saying hunt, I know JJ briefly touched on it. You're talking the side to side or rolling.
It'll be tracking straight along, and all of a sudden it'll veer to the left and then veer back to the center, and it will continue to do that. The drawback of the Imakatsu is it's a Japanese product as well, but they're very hard to get. They're really hard to get if you want to buy quantity.
And they're just as expensive as a jackhammer, and maybe not much better.
So not something to ask Matt about because he can't obviously order those.
Right.
The hunting action, you know, that we talk about, how many times you guys, you know, you're snagged on something and you rip it out, and as soon as you rip it out, you get smoked. Or you're reeling a crankbait and it hits off a rock, and then you get smoked. Well, it's the same thing, but what the hunting action does is it does that without contact.
Right.
So you could be reeling it just through plain water, and it'll act like it just hit something. And when it does that erratic action, it triggers that fish to just bite it, because it's that shad or that bluegill or whatever is thinks it's chasing, all of a sudden did something weird and is going to get eaten.
Yeah.
And that's why it's beneficial with crankbaits or vibrating jigs. You know, there's not a lot of other baits that really hunt, I guess, other than those.
Yeah. Now, also, Matt brought in at the show, we're starting to carry dem jigs. Dem jigs is really hard to get. John DeMay only sells them to certain stores. He doesn't sell them to just everybody. But Matt's also going to be selling John's blade bait as well. They're going to be a lot of different colors to choose from. They'll all be hand-tied skirts. So that'll be something to look for too. Something a little bit different.
Yep. Okay, so that kind of gives us a little bit about the chatterbait, the different offerings out there. If you have to pick one to use all year, is it a jackhammer, or are you choosing something different? What for the money is the jackhammer?
I'd probably take the jackhammer, but toothy things like the jackhammer also, and that would probably be my one hang-up. Was every time you get a northern, you're losing $16. But I think I like the hand-tied skirt on my jigs and my chatterbaits, and I like that. I like the eyes on it. I like the quality components. I know that egg snap is not going to straighten out. It's not going to come out. The other thing about the egg snap is it's the way the snaps are on there. It won't catch grass. Like sometimes if you have a clip on, the wires bend out after they clip in. They bend out. These bend in, so there's not an extra thing to catch a blade of grass. Because you catch grass on it, then your cast is done.
One good thing too about the original chatterbait is it does not have a snap. It has a.
That's right.
It just has a looped wire. I know a lot of guys when they throw braid really like to throw the original.
Yeah.
It's a little bit stronger, especially if you're in really high vegetation. And for the most part, chatterbaits, they were made for vegetation. They weren't necessarily made for throwing the laydowns and wood. They were made for fishing weeds. So
Okay.
that's a good choice if you are throwing braid.
Yeah.
So it sounds like, long story short, there's a decent Z-Man product in whatever price range you want to afford
Right.
with the chatterbait, which is nice. Like
Yep.
most tournament guys nowadays are probably throwing a hammer or a cricket.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're just so available everywhere.
Yep.
You know, from Walmart to wherever. But,
Yep.
you know, Matt carries all the different ones. So, and he almost always has them in stock.
And if you're not going to pay for the jackhammer, then you're going to want to do a little bit of research either on YouTube or in a pool or on your own, and figure out what your different ones are doing. We're not going to get into that completely today, but there are some that run a little bit deeper. There are some that stay up a little bit more, have a little more lift. There's different blade styles or sizes. Yep. So you just experiment a little bit, you know. But like I said, if I was getting one, I'd get a jackhammer.
And they are, Z-Man is coming out with a new chatterbait, a Brian Thrift edition, which has an oversized blade.
That's the big blade one we were talking about?
Yeah, I'm not sure when that's coming out, but
we didn't
I think some people have talked about it.
Also, not maybe as necessary for river fishing. Sometimes the water's really, really clean, but they've come out with a new jackhammer flavor, and it's called the Stealth Blade.
Yeah.
And what they've done, I was looking at them at the show. I don't think I bought one yet, but it's a slightly smaller blade. Chuck's got one, and I'll put a picture of these on the
a little
video.
plastic
it's a
blade.
Slightly smaller blade, and it's clear. So the thought is to be just a little more finessey with your presentation.
It doesn't thump it quite as much either.
Yeah.
So
So maybe somewhere like Lost Grove, when it's fishing a little tougher,
a little clearer water
a
too.
little cleaner water, you might want to try a stealth jackhammer if you invest in one of these. Okay, well that's a little bit about Z-Mans and the other ones out there. You know, that's about the chatterbait. One thing I want to do before we move to talking about trailers is let's talk about what time of year the chatterbait shines, why it shines, and what are the conditions that you're typically throwing a chatterbait in?
I use it all year. I mean, obviously there's ice on the water here right now, but if there's open water, I will throw it. I'm not afraid to. Like Chuck alluded to earlier, it's super good around weeds, but I also think I love throwing a swim jig, but with the water's a little more off color. A lot of times the chatterbait will work a little better in the spring. In the spring when it's high and muddy, and you're just up, you're fishing shallow water. I mean, around wood they get a little sticky sometimes. We'll get into ways to avoid that, but I think muddy water and all year round.
Yeah.
You can find a way to use it.
I don't throw it as much all year round, but it's always definitely in the box. But spring, fall, I throw it a lot. I don't throw it as much in the summer.
And is that because fish are more active chasing bait fish and panfish in spring and fall?
Yeah, I think so. The reason I don't throw it in the spring or the summer as much as I'm frog fishing or doing something there.
Well, the vegetation's moving up, less water in areas.
Yeah, a little harder to throw.
It is hard. It is also hard to throw. Like for instance, here on the river, if you're fishing the main river and there's current, it's not a super great bait around wood and current because it does hang up.
Yeah.
Okay, so predominantly though, we're seeing a lot of spring and fall.
If you are going to throw it around wood, you'll want to either use the Project Z with a weed guard, or we're going to have the Dem Jigs as a weed guard in his as well, and you'll be able to either put the weed guard in or take it out on that jig. So
that's a little bit about season. Let's talk about type of conditions, right? I don't think any of us are bringing out a chatterbait if there's zero wind, bluebird skies. Is that relatively accurate, or is that wrong?
I throw it all the time in the spring.
But the best day of the year to be throwing it, I'm looking for the best day of the year.
Yeah, you'd probably like a little bit of chop, like a spinnerbait. Basically a chatterbait has kind of taken over the spinnerbait world.
Right.
But a little chop on the water.
What is the perfect condition? Like, I know you guys use them all year, great. But some people don't. What about the exact condition? Wind, sun?
Yeah, obviously a little wind is always best.
Cloudy with a light breeze to a moderate breeze, and then usually some sort of weeds.
Yeah. And the reason for that is because these make some real commotion.
Yeah.
So I've seen JJ on a day where the swim jig's maybe not producing as much, go to the, this is just a bladed swim jig really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's a little bit about, maybe when the light bulb moment go, let's try a chatterbait.
I wouldn't be afraid to throw it anytime, but there are better times.
Let the fish tell you,
Yeah. A lot of times you're getting a reaction strike with a chatterbait, so a reaction strike can be any time, as long as but if the fish are on the bottom in a cold front and they're just sitting there, it's going to be tougher to fish.
Yeah, you want to get it in the grass, rip it out of the grass, and that's when they're going to bite it.
Yeah, so just real quick for Chatterbait Story, I went to the Headwaters Lake last week or week before, I don't know when it was, and I fished all day. Bluebird skies, not much wind. I was using like a swimming orb and a swimming jig and catching fish here and there, but then a little bit of a front rolled through, the wind started blowing, the sky cleared up, and I was like, chatterbaits. We switched to chatterbaits, still same premise of a swimming action, but we started nailing fish on a chatterbait because they're moving around and less visibility. And
yeah, the chatterbait does really well in the grass, and it's kind of an improved spinnerbait. Basically, the spinnerbait gets hung up in the grass, so it's kind of replaced that. But
so predominantly spinner,
Yeah, if you're going to throw a spinnerbait to chatterbait, a lot of times
more effective.
Might catch more fish.
The other thing on that comparison there is, I can skip this thing 100 times better than the spinnerbait. So if you're fishing docks or overhangs, you put a flat trailer on that sucker, you can skip that thing better than just about any lure that I have.
Right.
It'll skip. So dock fishermen, actually, the guy that made these was from the Carolinas, where they fish a lot of docks, and Brian Thrift was one of the first ones to bring it to the tour. And when they were fishing on Lake Norman where there's no weeds, but they were using it as an alternative to skipping a jig under there, and it was more of a, when the fish are suspended underneath that dock, they can skip it in and reel it back, and it's not on the bottom. So it's just another tool that you use. But yeah, if you got the ability to skip, or even if you're learning how, this is a pretty good lure to learn how.
Right. And you got to pick the right trailer.
Right.
If you're going to skip.
Right.
So before we
Brings
use
us to
trailers, I
treasures.
got one last question. JJ brought up the history of the Chatterbait, which I found a little interesting. Do you know what year range these came out?
I think it was about 04.
Okay.
It was, I was on it early. Actually, Brian Thrift was kind of the first one to bring it out, and he won what's now this Toyota series, I think, but it was an Everstart or whatever the feeder for the FLW was, and he won one of those. And I happened to read the article. I'm like, I bet that would work on the river. So I got some. Well, about a month later, he won a FLW tour event on Okeechobee. And as soon as he won that thing, they sold all those things out. I sold a bunch of them for like 60, 70 bucks a pop. It was awesome. But that was about 04 is when they came out. But I think those guys, Thrift and Andy Montgomery and them, were on it a lot earlier. They were friends with the Rad Lures. I can't remember the guy's name.
Did you report that to the IRS?
I may have, yes.
Yeah.
I may not
He's
have.
outside the audit
Yeah,
window. He
yeah,
was all
okay.
But but yeah, they when it came out, it seemed like to me it would be perfect for the river, and it
Yeah.
is. You know, it's really
Well, it's amazing. Like right now, they're catching them on Eufaula with the chatterbait.
yeah.
Do you got to pay capital gains tax
It's a
on
great
fishing lure profits?
You might.
That'd be another Family episode.
Yeah.
All right, so that's a little bit about the different types of chatterbaits, when we throw these chatterbaits, and the history of chatterbaits, which very cool info, JJ. Chuck, if you don't mind, will you pick, let's say, two things that we've got sitting up here and talk about why you find value in those?
Right. My favorite trailer is the Gary Yamamoto Zako, or Zako, however you want to pronounce it. I like this. It doesn't overpower the chatterbait. Lets the chatterbait still do what it's supposed to do. This just gives it a little bit of kick in the back. I like that one a lot, especially when I'm fishing early spring. A lot of times, the other trailer I use is a little boot tail. Not too big of a boot tail because I don't want it to overpower the chatterbait. But a lot of times when they're feeding on shad, I'll put this on. And I actually rig it upside down. It seems to be a little more subtle than right side up. But those are my two favorite. Once in a while I will throw a Craw, but not very often. And a lot of times when you do throw a Craw, it's because you want to maybe keep it up in the water column and keep the bait up. If you're fishing really shallow, sometimes that's an option too.
Okay, so we got a bulkier swim bait with no kick, and then we've got a little smaller swim bait with a lesser kick. Because
Right.
again, you mentioned not wanting to overpower the action.
Right. If you get too big of a 5.8 or something Kitech, it would just be all boot tail. It really wouldn't be as much.
Well, we were saying,
action.
you were saying beforehand, you've got two things action. You got the
Right.
blade, and then you've got the tail. And you say when those are both going too
Yeah.
much, there's no hunting action, and it's more
Right.
finesse.
Yeah,
But
it's
then
just-
JJ, you had a point about that, about shallow water. What was that?
If you're fishing in skinny water, real shallow or around wood, you may not necessarily want you want more lift, and also if you're using a bulky craw trailer like say a Rage Bug or a Z Craw Junior, those are two ones that I like as a craw trailer. They have two flaps on the back, but they two benefits of that. One, they're flat, so when I'm skipping it under a dock, it helps with that. Number two, they do take away a little bit of the erratic action, but if you're fishing around wood, that's okay because it keeps the hook pointed up. It keeps it as it comes over the log. It's not doing this. It comes over like this, and it's still wobbling, but it comes over with its hook oriented up, so your hook doesn't flip over. My other trailer that I like is the Little Dipper or a small paddle tail, and like Chuck said, you get the bigger hollow belly paddle tails. A lot of times they'll interfere. This little guy has a very small tail. It also has a high frequency vibration that just about matches the chatterbait, so it does not interfere as much as some of the paddle tails. And I like to use this, and I'll bite it off kind of right by the eyes and rig it on there. I've used this from the get-go, and I've had a lot of confidence in that.
And that's the reaction innovations a little bit. Right?
Yeah, and then, but if I'm throwing a craw, I like that double tail, like the Rage Bug or the Z Craw. Even a ultraviolet speed craw is good. But again, they're gonna take away a little bit of the erratic action. Now, if you're fishing in weeds, you don't need that hunting as much because you're hooking in the weeds and you're ripping it out, and that's gonna make it jolt. It's gonna jerk this way and fall that way, and you don't need that natural hunting.
Right. Yeah, because you already got when you're putting these trailers on, you're basically getting a bait with 3 different actions.
Yeah.
You're getting the noise that it's clicking a lot of times to the head, the bait's wobbling, and then you're getting action from the trailer that you're using.
Yeah, and if you throw that Zaco on a regular hook, it doesn't have a lot of action, but when you put it behind that blade and that blade starts it wicks back and forth pretty good.
Yeah.
Okay. So I got two to share here, and Matt I know has a good amount of both of those. They're both big bite products. I found myself using these most. The first one is actually designed for a chatterbait specifically. It's called the SwimOn. It's a nice little chatterbait trailer. I will zoom in on these, all the things we've talked about, and kind of overlay them. So if it's more of a fishy profile, either like JJ said, the Little Dipper, or I'll go to the SwimOn's a great one because it's got these 2 independent little tails that are just meant to kind of flap. And then the other one I'll use if I think it's more of a craw thing or I want to keep it a little more shallow is the swimming craw from Big Bite. And normally you don't maybe pick a craw with big flap, but this one is no flanges on the tails, so it really doesn't affect the action as well because you just want something that's doing that behind the chatterbait. So Matt has tons of these.
Yeah, we just got back from Gunnersville, and I'm learning the SwimOn. I bought some and threw them down there, and I did catch a few fish with that SwimOn on there, just trying to learn it. And it is a good, tasty action. It's kind of like the Zaco in that it just
real subtle.
It has a subtle tail, but when that blade makes it, that thing wobbles, and it's got holes in the tail. It's supposed to leave bubble trails.
Yeah, I mean this thing is pretty much designed for bladed jigs.
Yeah, or spinnerbait. I know a lot of guys that throw them on.
Yeah,
back to
something with the
spinnerbait.
action that needs to just
it
be
just
subtle.
gives you a little bit of action. Not too much.
I don't know if they still include it, but in the original chatterbaits, they come with that little plastic.
Yeah, basically
split tail.
like a
It's just almost like a bulkier.
They don't have those anymore.
They must have done away with it. I don't know.
No, they don't. But it was basically just something like this. A little slimmer though, but it had a little
had 2 tails.
2 tails.
Yep.
This is a real subtle. These are really popular also for a chatterbait.
But Matt's got a ton of these swim-ons in custom colors. I would take a look at those. These are nice chatterbait trailers. So
yeah. So what? Let's talk about line.
okay.
What's the preferred line that everybody's using for their
lines and
chatterbaits?
line and rod,
Yeah.
I guess.
So you go to Brett Height, who's arguably the
Authority on
authority,
chatterbaits.
and he throws it on a fiberglass rod with fluorocarbon. And I think we talked a little bit about in the line and the rod section. I talked a little bit about how you can adjust that if you wanted to use a heavier rod and mono, or you can use a heavier rod and fluoro, or you can use a lighter rod with braid. And a lot of times I used braid a long time, almost exclusively, because I was fishing in weeds, and when you're tearing it out of the weeds, if you have mono or fluoro on, I just feel like there's so much stretch, your wrists are about ready to break by the end of the day. So you can use whatever, and the one thing that I have for sure noticed that goes along with what Brett Height says is if you use that glass rod, like a 736 CV Dobbins, when they eat that thing, by the time you get that hook into them, they have got that thing down. I mean, it's down in the gullet.
Yeah,
Do you think
won't
that
pull the bait
train of
from
thought is more for open water chatterbait fishing? Not guys ripping it
a
out.
fiberglass rod.
That do it with the 736 glass.
No, I think because
The more grass you fish, I think you want a softer rod, because what you don't want to do is use too stiff a rod where it's getting hooked in the grass and you're ripping it out, but you're ripping the bait so far past the strike zone that you just don't get bit. What you want to do, the great thing about that glass rod in fishing grass is that when you jerk that bait out, it doesn't shoot so far.
Yeah.
It just barely comes out of the grass, and then it gives them a chance to grab it.
And we're talking about crankbait rods right now.
Yeah, we're talking
Yeah,
about,
fiberglass.
yeah, it's an
Fiberglass,
S-Class,
moderate.
735 or 736 CB glass rod from Dobbins.
I think. And
So what is your
St. Croix
preferred-
makes one that's a pretty good glass.
What are you throwing chatterbaits on?
A 735 glass,
You are?
yeah.
And your reviews in the...
I use the 736 CB glass, but if I'm limited in rods, like going as a co-angler, I will use it on a 734 Champ.
Yeah,
The 736 glass serves one purpose for me, and it has a chatterbait tied on all the time. But if I don't have 12 rods on the deck, I
Right.
might be using it on a
yeah,
734.
and I use it on 17-pound fluorocarbon,
Yeah,
is what I like
17
to
to
throw it on.
20 with a
Yeah.
6 to 7 ratio, gear ratio. Really, you don't want to move it too fast. But I have found, and this happened at Gunnersville last week, we were getting hit, and those suckers are smoking right at you, and you got to be able to catch
Yeah.
up to them. And sometimes with that glass rod, it's hard because that thing's flexing and you're reeling like crazy, and
Yeah.
they swim right at you and then get
Minimum
off.
7 to 1.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't think you go below that, but a lot of times when I'm fishing deeper, like a heavier jackhammer, I'll throw it on a 734
yeah.
just because it's farther away, it's down deeper, you need to get the hook into them.
I know.
But for grass, the glass rod is the ticket.
Okay.
I know I've lost fish using my 734. I can think of about 2 specifically that happened in pretty big tournaments that I lost fish because I set the hook too. I pulled it away from them, because you can, on a Champ or a Champ Extreme, you can feel those blades stop vibrating and you think he's got it, and you set the hook and they don't have
Yeah.
it. And that glass just lets you. That glass does prevent you from pulling it away.
So if you're going to use braid in a stiffer rod, let them eat it like a crankbait.
Got
almost.
it. You almost don't
Yeah,
want
give
to
'em
watch
some
the
time.
lure. Just keep reeling and then just lean in. Yeah.
I think
Okay.
when you're fishing grass, though, you just end up moving the bait just a little too far when
Yeah.
you're snapping it out of there.
You'll move it fast too. Yeah.
Yeah.
You got to be patient in the grass, I think. With
Yeah.
it.
Okay. Well, that is a lot on chatterbaits. I know I've been pretty long-winded.
Right.
We could probably go for quite a while longer, but is there any lasting things you want to say to these guys or gals before we sign off for the week?
You just kind of got to get a few different chatterbaits. Not everybody wants to pay $16 for a chatterbait.
Yep.
The original chatterbait does just fine.
And that's a great thing you brought that up, because Matt is running a sale this week
It's perfect.
on the original chatterbait. He's running them. They're normally $4.99. He's selling them for $3.99, so 20% off.
It's a heck of a buy.
That's a good deal on that cheap of a bait. And then the other thing he's doing is on jackhammers, so best of both worlds. And I think he told me that he was selling the Matt jackhammers, I'm sorry, for $14.25.
Wow, that's good.
Lowest
About cheap as
around.
you're gonna get it.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I don't know. I don't have the
A lot of
percentage.
places are.
I don't have the
20
percentage
bucks.
off in my head on that, but three something off.
Yeah.
So pretty
Yeah.
good discount. You don't see deals on jackhammers.
And,
so.
and Matt carries all these trailers too. Every trailer we have here, Matt carries them all.
Yep.
And experiment and try
Yeah.
something. Just because we tell you this or that,
Yeah.
people are doing all kinds of stuff. You watch 10 of these videos, there's 10 different guys throwing 10 different things. So
Yeah.
you can, make it look good in your mind, make it feel good while you're reeling it, and then you'll be confident in it and you'll throw it. And if you throw it long enough, you'll find out how to catch fish on it.
Yeah, and really, when you're buying a chatterbait, there's really about 4 colors that you really need to concentrate on. Maybe concentrate on a white, a black and blue, a green pumpkin, and the ever popular fire craw. That pretty much covers
Yeah.
all your chatterbait needs.
JJ, anything before we sign off here?
No, I think that's pretty covers it. The one thing is that they'll come in a lot of blade colors too, and that's again a lot of personal preference. People like gold if you're imitating a bluegill, black if you're imitating a crawdad, silver if you're imitating a shad.
Yep. Sums it up.
Sums it up. All right. Well, thank you guys for tuning in to another episode. Thank you for coming out to the outdoor show and supporting us. And we'll catch you next Friday.
See you guys.
See ya.